Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 112 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host Christian, and I'm joined by our co-host Brad.
Hello everybody.
Before we got too far into this episode, I just wanted to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you guys wanted to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. With that out of the way, let's get on with the podcast for this week.
All right. How was your week? Your post-Christmas week?
Oh, it was pretty good. It's always weird to me going from one major holiday into another, like back to back. So Christmas and New Year's for me are always like very, very hectic. Thankfully, this year that's actually not so much the case because of COVID. A lot of bad things came from COVID, but the stress that I feel during New Year's was not one of them.
Yeah, I didn't mind not being able to leave the house. I was okay with that.
What about you? How's your week been?
It was pretty good. The last 2 weeks, I was off of work. I banked up some PTO throughout the year, and I was able to take off work the last 2 weeks of December. I really just kind of stuck around the house. Did honeydews. I had a whole list. I got about half of the list done. And then it just seemed like it was over in a flash. And now I'm back to work and got the whole year ahead of me. Not ready for it.
Yeah.
It's one of those, you need a vacation from your vacation sort of things.
For our viewers that don't know, honey to-do list is stuff that you have been, I guess, neglecting around the home and stuff.
Right.
I guess we can go ahead and start off our podcast this week, though, by sort of talking about what we've been playing for the past week.
Sure.
I know for me, I haven't really been playing too much the past week just because of the holidays and stuff like that. But after looking into the data for the main topic of this show, there are certainly a few that I will be playing this week.
Excellent. What do you have your eyes on? Not to give away any main topic spoilers, but...
Yeah, so there was, in one of the challenges, this, like, Sultai graveyard stuff deck, I guess. That was just like a hodgepodge of cards, and I don't know how it works. Like I look at it and it's like I just didn't understand. So I'm gonna play it a little bit to see if I can understand more, to see if there's something there. I also really liked, there were a few blue-black control decks that's when condition was Devious Cover-Up, and I'm a sucker for stuff like that. So
yeah, I've never actually played with Devious Cover-Up. I mean, I guess I have, but it's always been in some janky, do-nothing brew. I don't think I've ever played a meta deck that uses it, but I've always been pretty intrigued by that card.
Yeah, it's very powerful. There was a limited deck in its limited format that was like, let's just have a bunch of Devious Cover-Ups and win that way. So I think it would be fun to do that in Pauper.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that seems like fun. Sultai is always a good color. I'd like to see it do a little bit more in our format, but I don't know that we have all the tools to do anything other than kind of like the deck you just mentioned. Some sort of graveyard, Devious Cover-Up shenanigans.
Yeah. What about yourself, though? What have you been playing?
Like you, I haven't been playing a whole lot. I didn't have nearly as much time on my hands over the holidays as I thought I would. So on the off chance that I had some downtime on the evenings after dinner or before bed or what have you, I'd just scroll through the league, scroll through Twitter, pick up, what people are playing now. There's some pretty cool brews floating around. There's a really killer Jund deck out there that just 5-0'd today, I believe. And yesterday I bought that in paper because I don't care if it's only good for a day. It looks so cool that I just want to have it in my box, in my collection. But really, that's all I've been doing, is just kind of messing with my paper cards, putting together a couple decks. I haven't really been on MTGO a whole lot lately But yeah, I'm kind of the same way as you are after looking through these challenges. It's kind of getting me excited for the new year, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I guess there was one other deck that wasn't challenge related that I did want to try. It was the like blue red. It has like 4 Thermo Alchemist, 4 Firebrand Archers, 4 Delvers.
Oh, is that the one you messaged me? The one that
Yeah, and
we
it's
talked about
yeah,
for a
it's
hot minute?
yeah, and it's playing like lightning bolt and chain lightning and stuff like that. That looks like a lot of fun as well. Like this like blue red pseudo burn control deck.
Yeah. With the spicy 4 of Kiln Fiends in the sideboard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that deck did look like a lot of fun. Very old school. I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it had a full 4 fire and ice, didn't it?
I think so. It might have been 3. I'd have to look at it to know for sure.
Either way, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah. I guess we can go ahead, if you want, go ahead and segue right into our main topic for the week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so this week we wanted to talk about sort of our December power rankings. How we do them here at Common Knowledge is that we look at all of the challenges for the past month, and we award points to each archetype as follows. You get 6 points for a first place result, 5 points for a second place result, 4 points for a top 4, 3 for a top 8, 2 for a top 16, and if you squeak into the top 32, you get 1 point.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and then we just tally up the points, and, we sort of list out a top 10.
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a few more than just the 10 that we're going to list, and we may touch on those as well, but these power ranking episodes, I think we talked about it. It's something we're going to do at the end of every month-ish, depending on what the schedule looks like.
Yeah, unless there's just like a very packed month with Pauper news or anything like that. Doing this monthly.
Spoilers or whatever.
Yep. But yeah, so I guess, did you want to start at the top or at the bottom, Brad?
Let's go bottom up.
All right. So in 10th place, we had Burn with a grand total of 21 points.
21 points over, 8 challenges in December?
Yep, exactly. Burn it had a few like pretty decent results. There were 2 of the 6 challenges, the second and third challenge in the month. So the second challenge of the first week and then the first challenge of the second week, where I don't think it put up any top 32 results.
The 6th and the 12th, right? Yeah,
so it sort of had that like speed bump, but overall it was relatively consistent, would put up a few top 32s or maybe a top 16 and a top 32, might squeak into the top 8 every now and again.
Yep. Yeah, I was just looking at one of the results, and I thought I saw Burn in second place at one point, but maybe I misread that. But yeah, it's always good for a showing every now and then, and I think one thing that I wanted to get out there, just to make sure everybody's clear, with our point system, we pretty much group all the decks together. So, like we mentioned, before the show, if a deck is running 12 Urza lands, it's a Tron deck. For the most part. We're not separating out Flicker or Mono Green or what have you.
Yeah.
Tron is Tron.
Yeah, there are a few, I guess, distinctions that we did make. So, like, for example, Mono Red is different enough for Burn to me to be considered its own separate deck. I sort of grouped the Mono Black decks in a few different ways. And then, of course, the Delver decks, I think, are different enough to sort of warrant their own spots as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest deviation, or whatever you want to call it, would be the Tron decks, because there's quite a few different versions out there. But generally, Tron is Tron as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. But yeah, so after Burn in 10th, we had Boros Monarch in 9th with 4 more points, sitting at 25 points. Boros Monarch, I don't know, it was really weird and sort of disheartening to me to see not just Boros but also Mardu Monarch. They sort of fell off at the end of the month.
They did. Yeah.
So Boros was putting up some really strong results early in the month as well as in the middle. But the last two challenges, it was nowhere to be seen in the top 32. And then Mardu for the second half of the month was also nowhere to be seen. I would be interested in trying to dive deeper to see what's keeping them out.
Right.
I think I know what, but...
Yeah, there's plenty of theories, but yeah, I'm with you. It is a very powerful deck. Sometimes it's hard to even overcome that deck if you're playing against it, but I do like seeing it show up every week, a couple times in leagues, once or twice in the challenges. It just feels like a natural tier 1 sort of deck, and it was weird to not see it for a couple weeks, or not see it really perform very well anyway.
Yeah. And then after that, in 8th, we had Walls with just one more point, 26.
Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty good example of what happened to Monarch, or not knowing what happened to Monarch, is Walls actually scored more points than the tier 1 deck this past month.
Yeah, and I don't know, it was interesting because Walls sort of did the exact opposite that Monarch did, where it had not so great of a beginning the first week. It didn't show up anywhere. And
yeah, I think people were still testing it and trying to figure out exactly what they wanted to do with it, with these crazy-ass Cascade creatures.
Exactly. And then the second week it sort of started showing up, and then the third and fourth weeks it sort of kept its presence, I guess.
Yeah.
And then after that, we have another one of the titans or pillars of the format, Affinity, at 28 points.
Yep, these are all pretty close. Boros, Walls, Affinity, they're all within a couple points of each other. Even the next slot up, they're all kind of fighting for that 25 to 30 point range.
Yeah. Now, I will say Affinity's number to me is somewhat deceiving, because I want to say it was the very first challenge of the month. I think it might have had like a really high top 8 placement, as well as a few other placements within the top 16. So it gathered 13 points in one challenge. But outside of that, it was like 1 or 2 appearances for the most part.
Yeah, on December 5th, it looks like it placed 2nd and 11th, 13th, 14th, and 28th and 30th. So yeah, that would be the majority of the points it earned all month right there.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was good enough to get it the 7th spot. And then after that, in 6th place with 2 more points, we had Boggles or Bogles.
We had Boggles. Bogles, yes.
Yeah, 30 points was a pretty good spot for Bogles. To me, this was actually somewhat surprising. There were a few challenges where it didn't really show up at all, but I was really surprised by the staying power that this deck had. Well, obviously, it did do much better in the beginning when people were still trying to figure out like the new metagame. The fact that it even had Nihilist showing up towards the end of the month was a little bit surprising to me, because it just wasn't something that I expected.
Yeah, that is surprising. I know, I think we've talked about it before, but that's sort of how I feel. When you listen to people that play Standard a lot, when there's a new set coming in or a rotation, everyone says that mono-red aggressive decks are the one to go to because people are still figuring out the meta, figuring out what decks are going to be good. But mono-red's easy to play with. It's easy to win with. So everyone kind of flocks to that. I feel like Boggles is the Pauper comparison to mono-red in that respect. Like we got Commander Legends, all these new crazy cards came in. Everybody was freaking out about the downshifts. They thought the format was going to be in turmoil. So what do you pick up? You pick up Boggles because it's linear, it's fast, and you can definitely pick up some wins against these people that are trying to test all these new cards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to add to that, another thing about Boggles is that typically whenever a new set releases, particularly one of the like cool big sets like Commander Legends, stuff like that, there's always an influx of new Pauper players, it feels like, where people are like, what should we do in this format? And those players are typically also doing like all the new hotness. And Boggles is one of those decks that is very surprisingly tough to play against in this format.
Yes.
And so whenever you're a new player to the format, it can be very challenging because Boggles has a very straightforward game plan. And it has a lot of tools to succeed against the unassuming.
It does, and it didn't. I'm looking at a 5-0 Boggles list from the 30th, and it doesn't appear to have adopted any Commander Legends cards. It stuck through it and just sort of jammed out the month. It didn't need Fall from Favor or Cannonade or anything like that.
Yep. And then after that, sort of beginning our top 5, and where we start to, soon we'll see somewhat of a separation, is going to be Mono Blue Delver with 35 points. Mono Blue Delver, it had a pretty strong beginning of the month, and then it looks like it sort of started losing favor to the blue-red and blue-black Delver decks as the month went on. But
yeah, I was pretty surprised. It did start strong. I thought actually these results would be flip-flopped. I thought it would suffer at first, and then come on a little bit stronger once they started adapting Fall from Favor and what have you. I don't really have a reason why I thought that. I just it didn't seem like Mono Blue Delver was all that strong for too long. But
yeah. Now, granted, it's
my own personal eye on it.
Yeah, granted, it's not like a bad deck or anything like that. But I sort of agreed that I expected it to sort of like pick back up in popularity as opposed to continue to fall off. But that could also be that, if I'm somebody that really likes blue something Delver decks, I might play the one that's perceived to be like the best positioned, regardless of what it is, because they share so many cards.
Right. If you're going to play Mono Blue, why not just play Blue Black Delver?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then in 4th place, we had Mono Green Aggro, or Mono Green Stompy, depending on what you call it.
Full 10 points above Mono Blue.
Yeah, and it had a lot of really consistent results across the challenges. The first one, it had 1, then it had 6 points, then 3 points, then 5 points, then 6, then 4, then 6, then 10. So it seemed like there were 2 outlier challenges, but for the most part, it stuck around 4 to 6 points.
Yeah, it had points every week, or every challenge, not just every week, but every challenge. And this was the deck that everybody counted out. When spoilers hit, and I think I'm guilty of being in that group. But when spoilers hit and Fiery Cannonade was revealed, I think it was the last card even revealed, at least maybe the last common. It was just hashtag Stompy's dead. Can't play it anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. It turns out whenever you have like really good, I guess, resilience and stuff like Young Wolf and speed from Burning Tree Emissary and stuff like that, your deck is going to continue to be good regardless.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very good to see. I'm happy with Stompy.
Yeah. And then next, we saw an even larger jump than 10 points. In 3rd place, we had Blue-Black Delver.
Yep.
Blue-Black Delver had 64 points this time around.
64 points.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, now granted, there was one challenge. I think it was the 5th challenge of the month where it scored 21 points because it just had a plethora of top 8s. This might be the most played deck in Pauper challenges. It certainly at least feels that way.
I would think so. Yeah, I'm trying to find that challenge, but it was, I think it had 8 or 9 showings in the top 32. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it took 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, 14th, 16th, or sorry, not 16th, 17th, 21st, 29th, and 31st.
Wow.
So it just from top to bottom of the entire challenge. I think that maybe this deck's spot is a little bit higher in our rankings than in other people's, because to me, sort of a good way to measure health of a format is also volume of a deck being played, so it might, like, overall it had reasonable success, but it might not be the most successful deck on this list, but I do think that there is something to the fact that it's just played a whole lot.
Right. yeah, it's played in such numbers that it's bound to do. I mean, it is a good deck. It's not just getting lucky, but yeah, it's played in such numbers that it's bound to do well pretty consistently. Especially in the hands of some of these players. Um, some pretty well-known players picking up these decks and rocking them out.
Yeah. And then in second place, just barely eking out Blue Black Delver, is going to be Tron with 66 points.
Oh, Tron. Yep.
Yeah. Now it is worth noting that there was like Flicker Tron, and then there was the like Wooburg Tron that was playing like the Raven Inspector and Core Skyfisher that Methodical sort of I guess made known.
Yeah. He patrioted it.
Yeah. But Tron actually had a pretty consistent month. There was one weekend, I think it was the second weekend, where it had like an abysmal number of challenges. But outside of that, it was a pretty consistent deck, and it just did what Tron does, which is be played in enough numbers to where it can always show up a few times in the top 32. But really, it had quite a few top 16 and top 8 performances.
Yeah, it did. It wasn't the, at least in December, it wasn't the exact powerhouse we're used to from Tron, but it showed up in just about every challenge.
Yeah.
I believe so. Let's see. Where we at? Tron 13 week 1, 6 week 2, 4, 3, 10 points on week 5, 6, and then it finished out the month of December, finished out the year with 10 points and 14 points. So yeah, it was coming back.
Yeah. And then, of course, the number one overall deck was none other than Blue Red Delver.
Scred.
78 points.
Yep. Pretty noticeably higher than Tron.
Yeah, a full 12 points. And again, some of that is probably the Delver decks are a little bit more popular. But with that sort of jump, I'm just looking at the middle challenges of the month where it had a string of 11 points, 13 points, 15 points, 17 points.
Wow, yep.
It felt like after this archetype really adopted Fall from Favor and figured out numbers and stuff, it was far and away the most dominant deck.
Yep. And that's I'm looking at the deck list now, and this one, runs 3 Fall from Favors, 2 Cannonades in the sideboard, but other than that, it's the Scred that everyone knows and loves, pretty much saying, the creature package, spells, lands, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, too, this is probably, I'm not really sure what to attribute this to. I'd probably know if I paid a little more attention to the meta, but Swirling Sandstorm has been showing up in just about every sideboard I've seen that can play red. Either a 1 of or a 2 of. What do you think about that?
To me, it makes sense.
Because I feel like it fell off for a little while. Maybe earlier 2019, earlier 2020. It was everywhere, and then it was nowhere, and now it's back again.
Yeah, so to me it makes sense. It's a good way to, like, the Fiery Cannonade is good against, I would say, the majority of the format, because, a lot of what you're going to be playing against is, of course, Delver decks and stuff like that. But Swirling Sandstorm is still pretty good against, like, the Cascade cards, and, it can kill a bunch of walls all in one swoop if you need, like, a cleanup card if they're starting to rebuild.
That is true. It does hurt some walls. Yeah, I didn't think about walls being a problem, but yep, that's probably it right there. It's probably walls tech or anti-walls tech.
And then, of course, sort of the same thing. We talked about how Boggles was relatively consistent. It's also a pretty good Boggles card because, a lot of times, like, you're fighting with Boggles about, like, what enchantments you're going to let them resolve and stuff like that. And so it's nice to have some sort of sweeper to just clean up what they have going after a few enchantments stuck.
Yep. That'd be just about good game if you're the Boggles player.
Yeah, because in my experience, Boggles is a pretty tough matchup for the Blue-Red Delver deck. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have something that can maybe stifle them in the middle parts of the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, everything they have is, or everything Scred runs anyway, is targeted removal, and that's useless against Boggles. That's the whole point of it.
Exactly.
So...
But yeah, I don't know. To me, we talked about it the last time we did one of these like power rankings episodes, but there were some pretty cool, I think, like storylines, if you want to call them that, that came out of the challenge. The most evident one to me is how much Delver dominated.
Yeah, it was surprising.
Yeah, in total, Delver Fairies sort of deal put up 177 points amongst all archetypes. Probably
huge.
far and away the most played style of archetype were these tempo decks or these slightly faster paced control decks.
For perspective, from 5th to 10th place is about the same amount of points that the Delver decks got.
Yep. And then, Tron itself put up 66. I don't know, it felt like to me those were far and away the top two archetypes. Again, to me, one of the things that I always like to look at when looking at not necessarily like the health of the format, but where the format is just how much are people playing these decks. Because oftentimes what is perceived to be good ends up what is good just because of how much people play it.
Right.
And
strength in numbers sort of thing.
Yeah. And I myself like Pauper right now, but if you were to say, hey, Christian, what do you think the problem is with Pauper? For me, I would go, it's probably Tron and it's probably Delver, just because Tron is so dominant and Delver is played so ubiquitously that...
Yes, it's just, you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
I noticed that, not just the challenges, but I like to look through league results just to see what kind of neat brews are out there, neat tech, this sort of thing. That's where you find a lot of the fun decks is at that 5-0 level at the leagues. But even the leagues lately have been just full of Delver decks and Scred decks and blue-black Delver, mono blue. Before, leading up to the last month or so, it almost felt like those decks were relegated to just the challenges. And the leagues are where you played more casual competitive, grind out tickets, chat a little bit, doing this and that. But now it seems like a lot of the challenge decks, especially the Delver decks, have made their way into the leagues.
Yeah. And, you could probably, depending on what you talk to, you could probably draw different conclusions from that.
Sure.
Because I think for some people, that's indicative that something might be wrong with the format.
Right.
Because, the top tables at the most competitive levels of play for the most part are these challenges, right? And that's where the Delver decks show up. However, and so you could say if it has to dominate leagues as well, then that probably makes the format unhealthy because it's all like the top tiers of the format.
Yeah.
You could also make the argument though that the format is very healthy because maybe it's just so many players like the top tiers of this format that they just play it so much more now. Maybe people are so happy with where the metagame is that they don't feel the need to sort of, play these brews and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're not fighting against the meta because they're having fun with the meta.
Exactly.
Okay.
To me, I think both worlds can be true. I think there are probably... I myself really enjoy the top tiers of Pauper, and I always have.
Right. Same here.
But to me, it's alarming that it appears that we have a very clearly defined tier 1, and then sort of like a tier 2. And then outside of a few decks every week, we don't really get to see much brewing going on these days. At least that's how it feels to me.
No, it is, and that's kind of the hidden point of what I was talking about with just scoping out the leagues that I do every day, every other day, whenever they get posted, or catching up on leagues that I haven't seen the results for. You just don't get those types of decks much anymore. Even in the power rankings, there were plenty. When we go over the top 10, but there was like 25 or 26 total decks that put up total archetypes that put up points, but there would be like the mono black burn deck put up 3 points all month. You know what I mean? So you're just not really gonna. You'll see that in the leagues a lot, but I pretty much forgot where I was going with that. But yeah.
No, yeah. So basically, it's like you do see brewing, but like it's hard to tell whether or not the brews actually have a chance, or sometimes they get lucky. Because it's like, for example, like blue green turbo mill, like could be a deck that has legs in the tier 2-ish part of the metagame, but at the same time, it only put up 2 points in one challenge, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or like, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. For a long time, it felt like the leagues are where you either would test out a brew, or where the tier 2 decks just lived and played against each other to get ticks, to grind out ticks. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then you'd face a tier deck or 90% of a Tron deck with a few cards thrown in that they wanted to test out, that sort of thing, quote unquote, a brew. But now it's instead of the leagues being tier 2 and challenges being tier 1, it's now the leagues are like tier 1.5, and the challenges are still tier 1, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Brad. The best brew that I ever had was playing Blue Black Delver and putting Fall from Favor in it.
That is some spicy tech right there.
Yeah.
Have you told anybody about that?
Man, I don't know. I keep seeing these players in these challenges. They're sort of stealing my ideas, you know. They're net decking, if you will.
They're... You gotta stop putting that stuff online.
I know, man. But
or at least get credit for it.
That's what I'm saying. I would happily take credit for something that I didn't do, especially if it's something as awesome as this.
I know, right?
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think the jury is still out. I think I could understand anyone that was like, I want a card from Tron or a card from Delver banned. And I could understand anyone that was like, man, this metagame is so much fun. And like, this is nowhere near as bad as like the Astrolabe metagame, for example.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't think it's as oppressive or suffocating as it was just over a year ago, or about this time last year, a little bit more than a year ago. And then there's a small percentage of people, very passionate people, that they don't necessarily love the meta as it is now, but they don't want things banned. They would rather sort of rally around their own brewing capabilities and creativeness to fight against the meta. That's the problem. You know, if they see 3 or 4 cards or 2 or 3 decks that are the problem, they want to brew to beat those decks instead of resulting in bans and everything else.
Yeah, I don't know. I think all of those perspectives are all very valid right now in this metagame. And that, I guess, is like one thing that I would like want to put out there, is that I don't think there is a clear-cut right answer.
No, and there's not. And no matter what your answer is, it's going to be polarizing to the other 2/3 of the pauper population.
Exactly.
No.
But yeah, other pretty cool stories to me. I know I already touched on it. Boggles sort of having some sort of staying power was something that was very cool to me. It feels nice to have one of those pillars of the format that'll probably never be tier 1, but will always be tier 2.
Yes, I love it. It didn't have to adopt it. It never. Boggles has been around forever. I think the newest card it got was Ram Through from almost 12 months ago. You know.
Yep.
But it's still powerful. It's still strong. It still does what you want it to do fairly consistently.
Yeah. Another thing, or I guess another type of deck, were the Cascade decks. Mm-hmm. They put up a decent amount of points. I think Cascade decks put up 20 or 21 points. I'm not quite sure which one. But it was weird because in talking to individual Pauper players, not so much talking you and I, but just like other people that I've been sort of chatting with, they had all like been really high on the Cascade deck and all thought that it was like way more powerful than the rest of the format. And it's sort of weird that like adding it all up, how different it was from general rhetoric. I don't know if you experienced the same thing talking to people, but
yeah, absolutely. Just looking at our sheet, the Teamer Cascade list put up 20 total points in the month, so it would have fell right with Burn or 11th place, you know, just right outside the top 10 of our power rankings.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was mono green aggro, or mono green Stompy that was sort of like the aggressive deck this time around, I feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
As far as the like go wide aggressive decks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You're right. There really nothing else could keep up with it or even put. I mean, just look at the top 10. There's no other really, maybe Affinity and Boros Monarch to a certain extent, but that's more mid range. There's really no other creature heavy list here in the top 10.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, one of the things is what I and other members of the Pauper community, I think, sort of theorize about why it's good is that the speed that Burning Tree Emissary provides sort of helps it get past maybe just like the lack of card quality in some regards.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think losing a card like Burning Tree would be more devastating for Stompy than Cannonade ever would be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But that makes me wonder if there's maybe... I know that it put up 1 point this month, and I think 2 months ago had a lot of good showings. The mono red aggro decks. I wonder what holds them back that doesn't hold mono green back, if that is
Like
the strong suit.
Your goblins and such.
Yeah, because it feels like you could just play Burning Tree Emissary in those decks and be just as strong.
Goblins does typically play Burning Tree, usually obviously a 4 of. You want them early and often.
Yeah.
I love Goblins. It's one of my favorite decks to play. It's a lot of fun. I don't expect a lot of success with it when I do play. But it's just, I feel like it's a... it's kind of tricky on the surface and by the name of it and everything going on. You look at it, it's got 30 plus creatures in it. You would think it's just a straight up turn sideways aggro list, but it ends up playing a lot more grindy than you would expect, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Game 1, you can bust them out, you can kill them in 4 turns, but then games 2 or 3, you're probably in it for the long run.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And to be fair, I also get the same vibe from the mono green Stompy deck with Nettle Sentinel, Young Wolf, stuff like that. Like those cards to me scream be very aggressive, but also specifically with Young Wolf, be very resilient to stuff like targeted hate.
Yeah, Goblins just doesn't have a lot of red deck wins, whichever you want to call it. It doesn't have a lot of resiliency. You know, if you wipe out a board of Goblins, there's not much you can do until you build back up in 3 turns.
Yeah.
You know, there's not Undying, and there's not all these other value cards, I guess.
Yeah, to me, those were all sort of the main storylines from the challenge. Was there anything else that you really wanted to like talk on? I know this month it seemed relatively uneventful as far as like super cool storylines, but I think that was because discourse has been so heavily focused on the obvious.
Yes,
and the obvious is mostly what's been going on.
Right. You'll still see cool decks posted online or what have you, but yeah, I don't think there was anything crazy about this month. Nothing that really, like you said, made a super interesting storyline.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess with our main topic out of the way, we can go on, and I guess there's one show announcement to make, and that is the death of the sideboard card of the week segment. I don't know about you. For me, it felt like something that started off as a pretty good idea, but then you realize that in Pauper, sideboards just don't change that much.
Yeah, they really don't. And the ones that you would pick, I don't know if there's even a reason to go over them. You know, at a certain point, you're just getting down to, well, I've picked all these cards. My pick is, I don't know, Red Elemental Blast. Let me talk about that for 5 minutes, you know?
Exactly. But we are replacing it with something. And what is that, Brad?
We are going to start doing a little Q&A every episode, time permitting. We're going to do anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 or 5 questions, depending on what we get. Let's kind of sprinkle those in at the end of the show before the outro. It's a little bit of a way to relax and get in touch, get in contact, and interact with the all the community out there. You can drop us a line for the questions on Twitter or in the Discord, DMs, however you get a hold of us. No questions really off the table. It doesn't have to be about Pauper necessarily, or even Magic the Gathering. Could be about anything. Just whatever you're feeling at the moment, and we'll try to get it on here. Family friendly, of course.
Yeah. So that being said, we do have some questions for this episode. Number one comes from Proto Foxy. They want to know what our favorite archetypes are.
Yeah, I got pretty much one favorite archetype, and it's been that way as long as I can remember, and it's heroic / aura enchantment based decks. I love them. They're typically terrible. They're not very good value cards, enchantments, and auras, but I do just love them. When I was heavily playing Standard a few years ago, I played the white-red heroic deck with a Crowan Crusader, and he made all the tokens and whatnot. One of my favorite Pauper decks is Mono White Heroic, even though I don't play it a whole lot. It was one of the first ones I built in paper. It was one of the first ones I bought on MTGO. There's just something, I don't know, there's something about having an entire stack of crappy enchantments on one creature and, swinging in with a 17/20 trample lifelink. I don't know. That's my idea of fun.
I know what you mean. Sounds like these challenges would have been good for you. You get to play Boggles.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I think everyone sort of knows that Blue-Black Teachings has always been my go-to. But if we're talking like playable decks, I guess Blue-Red Fairies isn't that bad either.
Teachings not playable, or it hasn't not been for a while.
So Teachings is playable. It just doesn't play Mystical Teachings. It actually had a few appearances in the challenges, funnily enough, as like a blue-black control with like devious cover-up style thing.
Right.
So that's playable. But for me, the card Mystical Teachings is what's cool. But I refuse to play Tron.
You're a man of values.
Exactly. But yeah, I don't know. I think my picks were pretty boring. Everyone sort of knows the deal with Teachings and Fairies, I think.
Yeah, still, your favorite's your favorite. Nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
Everybody's got a favorite.
Yeah. And then we had a second question from Miguel.sp, I believe. And they want to know what downshifts would we like to see.
Yep. And actually, I'm not totally sure if it is downshifts we'd like to see or our favorite downshifts that have happened.
Oh man. Well, I know that my answer that I had prepared was downshifts that I would like to see. I could probably find one that's happened.
No, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Reading is hard for me.
Yeah, for me, it was a Murmuring Mystic. Murmuring Mystic is a 1/5 creature that costs a blue and 3. It's a human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with flying. I would love to jam this in any control deck in Pauper. Or even like in the sideboard of like Blue-Red Fairies is like you get this down in the mirror match and then just go bonkers. I think this card would be a lot of fun, but probably not necessarily meta shifting.
No, definitely not. What do you think about it in some sort of blue-red spells prowess list with like Goblin Wizardry and that sort of thing?
That would be a lot of fun. I don't know. I was even considering, as you were saying, that the Thermo Alchemist decks that we had mentioned, I'm not sure. Yeah. Playing that over like either some of the Firebrand Archers or some of the Delvers or some of the spells could be a lot of fun as well, as like a young Pyromancer sort of thing going on in Pauper.
Murmuring Mystic, the new Pauper Pyromancer. I like it.
Pauper Pyromancer. Oh yeah, make it happen, wizards.
Make it happen, you cowards.
Yeah, but what about you? What cards would you like to see downshifted?
I have one that I'm pretty positive will never see the light of common play or common printing, and that is Lightning Helix. Red and a white. For an instant, Lightning Helix deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. It's a lightning bolt. and a healing salve all in one. What could go wrong? It's a little powerful, though, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's too powerful. It probably would warp the format in some way.
Sure. It might help those Boros Monarch decks come back to top 8, top 4.
Yeah. We could potentially see Jeskai Fairies.
Oh,
That would be fun.
Yeah, now you're talking. But no, I had more of a legitimate, and this would probably end up breaking the format somehow also, but my more legitimate desire for a downshift would be Wall of Omens. Have to see exactly.
I believe Wall of Omens is a white and 1 generic for an
White.
04 wall, right?
That is correct. Uncommon, first printing, looks like Rise of the Eldrazi for creature wall with Defender. When Wall of Omens enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Pretty straightforward. But I can see how, with some of the shenanigans we have in the format, that could get a little out of hand with your Ephemerates and your Ghostly Flickers. And it's an 04, which, absorbs the bolt and absorbs the cannonade. It does not absorb the Swirling Sandstorm, but yeah, I think this would be good. I think it'd be fun to play with. I do like playing white, so I'm always down for any sort of draw a card text on a white card, which
I am
we
as well.
have that much of.
Well, and then our third and final question comes from one Mark Pinder. He wants to know where we go for Pauper content.
All right, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, for me, Alex Ullman has probably always been one of my go-tos. I think Alex has a pretty good approach to where he wants to derive his ideas from and stuff like that. And I think it's always been pretty consistent, and I appreciate that a lot. And then recently, I've been enjoying all of the content posted in the Pauper Guild. More specifically, Vlaxia's first-person Pauper match stuff. It's been really inspiring to me. I think it's really well produced, and it's a lot of fun.
They're paper matches for those that haven't seen him. He does tweet the links out to him on Twitter as well, but he posts them in the Discord, and they're first-person paper games, and it's awesome to watch. He plays 3 or 4 different decks a week, or whoever's in these videos, I guess. Right. 3 or 4 different decks a week against other decks, and it is really, you're right, it's inspiring. It's a lot more entertaining than I think I'm making it out to be. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I don't know if you could go, hey Christian, what's the best Pauper content to come out from the past year? I would say number 1, Common Knowledge. Number 2, Vlaxia's first-person Pauper match stuff.
I think that's all you need right there.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, why go anywhere else?
Exactly.
I don't think there's any reason to. Mine's a little more all over the place as far as my Pauper content. Most of it, pretty high percentage of it, I get from Twitter, honestly, just asking questions, talking to people about brews, talking to them about meta decks. Hey, do you think this card would fit, or what do you think about this deck, or this sideboard tech, or just generic questions like what are you working on, what troubles are you having against certain decks, and it's sort of, once the ball gets rolling, it sort of generates its own content. You just have to keep up with the thread, keep up with the comments, weed out what you want, pick out what you want, what's useful to you. I do watch a lot of Valaxia's Pauper games, his paper games on YouTube. And really, yeah, Alex, I love when Brian DeMars puts out articles, old BDM, another Pauper pillar. He's always putting out interesting stuff. Either it's a brew, or he'll go into a deep dive on a meta deck, what have you. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, but I would honestly say that most of the information I get, whether it's content or advice, comes from the Twitters.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because you had like a really, really interesting answer. I think that's something that people might discount a lot, that there might be some bad stuff on Twitter, but oftentimes, not just Twitter, but all of these online communities are what you make it.
Right.
And I've had a lot of really positive interactions coming from Twitter and Discord and stuff like that recently. And I think that that's probably the best content one can get.
Yeah, I agree. It is, like you said, it is what you make it. These social media sites, Twitter especially, it is what you make it. If you can surround yourself, if you can cultivate a good community, a good base group of either people you follow or followers or just people you regularly interact with, it's going to make your experience 1,000 times better.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge.
All right.
If you guys want to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustGuyDad. And Brad, where can they find you?
At Pauper_B.
Yeah. Or if you guys don't have a Twitter, you can shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, you can hit us up on Twitter, send us an email, or leave a comment down below. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructive Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop brewing.